Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies again with another video. This time we're going to talk about zone-based policy firewall. I had to think about it because I had to make sure I had the name right. But CBPF, which is zone-based policy firewall. So this is an older technique. You probably won't see this out in the field as much. I've kind of seen it in some designs with like DNVPN Phase 3 or Flex VPN. But if you're studying for your CCIE security, you're definitely going to need to know what zone-based policy firewall is, because I can almost guarantee you're going to have to do it on the lab. So let's get to the blackboard here and discuss from a theory standpoint, what is zone-based policy firewall? So we got here, like do the titles here. So we got zone-based policy firewall. So it sounds exactly what it is. It's a policy firewall, but it is done on a router. So what you're going to do is I'm going to draw this out visually here. Let's say this is the router here. This is not a firewall per se, or what we know as ASA or FTD, but you would have a router. And then let's say I'll do three here, three links. Now, what zone-based firewalling is it allows you to mimic a firewall, but this is really going to be in the form of something similar to an ASA in terms of the firewall. And so it's only going to be layer 1 to 3, so to speak, but the configuration is totally different. You have to get used to something called MQF and MQC, which is the modular queuing framework and module queuing CLI. You probably heard me say this on a IBNS 2.0 ICE video. What this is basically stuff that you would do for QoS, but in this version, you're going to use the type of inspect. All right, so inspect is going to be your type. So you're going to have, I don't want to do all yellow here. So you're going to have a class map, type, inspect, and that's going to match whatever ACL you got, or you can match certain protocols. You can even do your own protocol if you want in the router by doing, I think it's IP port, and then you put in the TCP and then whatever the port number is. But don't quote me on that because I haven't done zone-based firewall in a while, because nobody really does it in the wild. And then there is a policy map, type inspect, which is going to match the class value. So underneath this, we'll do blue, would be class, whatever the class is. And then you can pass it, you can inspect it, or you can drop it. Those are your options there. Okay. Now, you're not done, because in there, the next thing you have to do, and this is going to, now that's just explaining the MQF, MQC that you need to do for a zone-based policy firewall. But each of these links can have its own zone. So you can have a zone WAN, right? And then you're going to apply that to say this is zone DMZ, and then this is zone LAN. Now, these are the zones that are going to be created in the firewall. And then to add those links to its respective zone, you have to do something that says zone member WAN. So now that that's in the WAN zone, zone member DMZ, and this will be zone member LAN. All right, whatever. All right, so now all the zones are in a different, all the interfaces are in a different zone, and now they technically cannot talk to each other, right? So there is no such thing as a security level, so that is not going to work. What you have to do is you're going to have to do this thing called a zone pair. All right. So your zone pair is going to be a combination of a zone, right? So you could do zone pair, you give it a name, and then you say source, LAN, destination, WAN, and then under that You can give it a description, but then you're going to have to do a service policy. And this service policy, sorry, type inspect, and then you got to call the policy map. So you would call this policy map over here, right? And then that's actually allowing the traffic to go from the LAN zone to the WAN zone. Typically, you're going to see things like, you know, HTTP, HTTPS. I'll just have S in there, DNS, NTP, stuff like that. Things that you need to use the internet would be in that zone pair, right? DMZ, you'll probably do the same thing. If you wanted to do it on a DMZ, you would have the same, you'd have a different zone pair, but the zone pair would be for DMZ and LAN, like LAN going to DMZ. Now, the traffic will be allowed back by state, but it can't be initiated from the others. So if you say the source is LAN going to WAN, as long as that traffic is initiated from the LAN side, the WAN will return, right? Based on state. That's normal state activity. But you can't go from WAN to LAN without creating another zone pair that has the source of WAN going to LAN. So as you can see why a lot of people don't use this technique per se, because there's a lot of configuration, a lot of MQF and MQC configurations and zone pair configurations that you got to do to get this to work. That's why I said you don't really see this out in the wild. It's an older technique, but those studying for the CCIE will need to do this. Now, again, I've seen this in DMVPN phase 3, people setting up different zones, and they'll have the WAN zone, and then the LAN zone will have the LAN interface on the inside, and then the interface, the tunnel interface will be in LAN, right? So LAN to LAN can talk because they're both in the same zone. Because if you just do DMVPN without zone-based firewalling on a router, technically, if someone was to blitz the WAN side of your router, if you're not properly securing it, they can end up jumping to the LAN side once they brute force in. So you just got to be careful of that. Now, that could be, this is another side quest. If you do stuff like URPF and you do it in strict mode, you can kind of get around that, because then someone can't kind of masquerade as an RFC 1918 address and spoof their way around an IP address. But that's a whole different topic. But this is zone-based firewalling in a nutshell. The thing about this here is, and this is for the CCIE folks, there is a gotcha zone in here that's in here by default, right? It's the self zone. So you can have in this option, you have zone WAN, DMZ zone, LAN zone. Now, if you want traffic to go directly to the router itself, so here, that is the self zone. All right. Now, the self zone would be things like if you want to ping the router, if you want to run OSPF, if you want to, for some reason, SNMP, stuff like that. I should just put IGP here. Things like that. That's going to the router itself. Like if you want to go to the loopback and not the interface, run the OSPF, IGP, stuff like that, you could technically do a zone pair that would be LAN to self. And then that allow that traffic to go to the router itself. Again, if you're doing SNMP, syslogs, things like that, that would tackle the self zone. In most of the situations that I've seen, that's going to tackle the self zone. You just got to be careful, because if you do the wrong zone pair or you have the wrong match, you can basically lock yourself out of the router by putting the wrong zone pair in there. So this is why a lot of people don't really use it, because there is a potential of you locking yourself out of the router if you have the wrong zone pair configurations. But this was a technique used back in the day, sparingly, and I mean very sparingly. Even in VPN setups, I've probably seen this probably 1%, maybe max 3% of the time. I don't really see this, but this is the same firewall technique that's used in SD-WAN. If you look at SD-WAN firewall policy, it's the same zone-based firewall technique. So they just they migrated it over to the GUI, but it's still underneath the hood. It's just zone-based firewalling. It's not your traditional firewall like an ASA or an FTD. Doesn't even look anywhere similar to that. It's the same thing. That's if you do firewalling on SD-WAN, just straight SD-WAN, it's zone-based firewall. So it's literally this. Now it does take away some of this MQF and MQC stuff, but underneath the hood is still, you know, zone-based firewall. So hopefully that answers your question about what zone-based firewalling is, the purpose of zone-based firewalls, the purpose of MQF, MQC. You're going to see a lot of MQF and MQC in a lot of things because it's very modular and you can do a lot of stuff with it. There's a whole bunch of types. Again, in this model, it's type inspect. In IBNS 2.0, it's type context subscriber. It's just so it's a different type. There's plenty of different types for class maps that you can use. So if you're in your CCIE studies, whether enterprise or security, start learning what different type of class maps and policy maps you can create because it's not just for QoS. This is Don from Padlock Technologies again. Don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe. Really appreciate this question here because I haven't used this technique in a while, so jog my memory. I hope this video was informative. Thank you and have a nice day.